Welcome to Cut to the Chase, where we talk about compelling legal, regulatory, and public interest information and news. Your host is Greg Goldfarb, an attorney, entrepreneur, investor, and activist.
Okay, folks, it's time for our favorite podcast, Cut to the Chase. I brought on Ashira Solomon, political commentator, African-American Jew, political commentator who's also a podcaster on a very exciting podcast called The Quad. And now she's going to start a new podcast, which you haven't told me the name of, but you will in a minute. So how are you doing? How are you doing, Ashira?
I'm doing well. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you today.
You know, I'm nervous as heck, but that's part of the process. And so I met Ashira at the American Jewish Committee Global Retreat in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago. And I was very excited to meet you and all the other people and talk about anti-Semitism and all that. And I said, oh my God, I was looking into your show. I'm like, you got this like hot show that just started right after October 7th, all these numbers and very exciting. So how's it going? Tell the audience about the Quad.
The Quad is, we like to say it's like the Israeli View. So it's for Jewish women, and we are talking about political affairs that are, specific to Israel and the Middle East at large. And we also touch on American politics. And our show is aimed at the international community, really giving an explanation to them of what is going on in Israel and what is going on in the Middle Eastern region.
All right. And so who are the three other co-hosts along with you on the Quad?
We have Fleur Hassan, who started the show. It was her idea, and she is also a producer of the show. She is the deputy mayor of Jerusalem. And we have Emily Schrader, who is a journalist and a human rights activist. And then we have Vivian Berkovich, who is the previous Canadian ambassador to Israel.
Nice. And the show is in English.
The show is in English, based in Jerusalem, and is produced by Jewish News Syndicate.
And the other three ladies, are they Israeli? What's their background?
They're all Israeli, but we're all immigrants. So Fleur is from Gibraltar, Vivian is from Canada, and Emily is from the US, like me.
All right, now I want to get into the name of the show, first of all, because you hear Quad and you're like, wait, did they say squad?
Yeah.
And so tell us about the name of the show, what it means, and like does it reflect the nature of the show and all that kind of stuff?
So the Quad, because it's four and we're four women, but also we did like the spinoff of Out with the Squad and In with the Quad. We actually do have an episode where each of us takes one of the squad members and we go after and have a little attacking moment on their ideologies and some of the awful things they've been saying about Israel and the Jewish people.
Now, all right, so give me a flavor, like what each, I know one of them just got bounced in the primary. So now are they still going to be, well, I guess they still are the Squad, but like, how bad are they really? Are they just, I mean, I know one of them is Palestinian or has Palestinian roots. You would have to expect,
yeah.
You would have to expect that she would be like supporting her people, right? You can't.
It's not the support of Palestinians or to be pro-Palestinian. I mean, I would say that I'm pro-Palestinian in the sense of I want to see them do well, have education, have rights, and not have to live under a terrorist organization, Hamas.
Yeah.
But so there's nothing wrong with being pro-Palestinian in that sense. However, they are very anti-Israel, and they've denied the rapes that happened to women on October 7th, to Israeli women. None of them have made statements on behalf of Israeli women. And they chant from the river to the sea, which we all know is a dog whistle. That means that we need to annihilate the Jewish state and Jewish people. It doesn't mean that Palestinians just want their quote unquote land back. It also means that the Jewish people would not be allowed to live in that land, and they know that. And so there's been plenty of clear instances of their anti-Semitic rhetoric.
All right. So just as a warning, I don't know if it's a warning, but I will be playing devil's advocate sometimes here, just to help.
As you should.
As and some of this is going to be a little educational. I've been following the Israeli Middle East conflict since I was a little kid, and I remember actually, speaking of women, when I was 6, 7 years old, there was gold in my ear, Yom Kippur War, and I was, barely like, I was like, all I was doing at that point was following my favorite football team. And then it was like Sunday and I'm like, oh my God, Yom Kippur. And my family was freaking out. But since Golda, I just really, there's not, I was like scratching my head. What other famous women leaders are in Israel? Like, who is there? And I mean, I'm happy to be speaking with you. Maybe you're going to be part of the new generation that will have, some women involved in the decision-making process.
I'm glad that you brought this up. I believe there was only one woman, and don't quote me on this because it might be no women, but I think there was only one woman who was a part of the war cabinet to strategize what to do in this war. And that was really the idea behind the Quad. Fleur Hassan has been such a strong voice. If anyone who doesn't know Fleur Hassan, they need to go follow her now and do your research on her, but she's been such a strong, outspoken voice, a woman's voice on behalf of Israel. And she is really passionate, and her statement is that there should be political representation, 50% women and 50% men. Me personally, I don't know if I believe in the quota system in that way. However, she has been a very strong voice saying, we need more women in Hasbara. Hasbara is like the public diplomacy arm of Israel to really explain what is going on in Israel. So Hasbara means to explain. And she was just saying we need more women faces in national security and political office. And so those voices need to be at the forefront as well.
All right. So I want to go.
But you're correct in saying that Golda Meir is like our biggest figure, and then it kind of drops off from there.
Yeah.
Not that there are women serving in the Knesset now, and as I said, we have Fleur Hassan as a deputy mayor of Jerusalem, but those faces are not being put at the forefront.
Yeah.
So this is why we do have the show, The Quad.
Okay. And all right. So I want to go back to my initial question with the squad, because I know a lot of people, they hear AOC and they love her. And I'm not, this is not a show to really just, demonize her and the squad or whatever, but I just want to kind of get your take on what are like the worst things that she's pushing and the other members of the squad.
For me, the worst thing that they are pushing is the denial of rapes that happen to Israeli women and not coming out and having a strong, firm stance on that. And then from Free Palestine, from the river to the sea, because that is not a statement of freedom. That is a statement stating that she wants the Jewish people and the Jewish state to be annihilated. And then they've said more very like specific horrific things that I don't have off the top of my head, but these are the big camp things. And then under that they have, certain sentences and things they've written on Twitter along those lines.
All right. So have any of the shows that the Quad has released gone through the squad? And
yes. So if you go and watch our episode, we have an episode called The Squad versus the Quad. And we go through all of their tweets and we have a response for it.
Okay. And I'm going to put that specific episode into my show notes in case people want to get a little bit more knowledgeable. Maybe AOC isn't all that you thought and all that stuff. Okay. Now let's go back to the women in politics in Israel. And what I consider to be a dearth of female voice in the political arena over there. Is there any females that are rising up aside from the deputy mayor that you see a good future for? You think that people will they need to be more out there and people need to pay attention to them?
To be honest, and I know that I'm such a big fan of Fleur, but to be honest, I think of course there's great women who serve in the Knesset, but in terms of the American audience and the English-speaking audience, it's really going to be Fleur Hassan. Given that Israelis don't really know how to communicate with the international community in an effective way. And given that Fleur is both British and Israeli, she just has that advantage of being able to speak in Hebrew and, effectively communicate to Israelis, and then also to be able to effectively communicate to the American society or English speaking society. So it's not that there's Israeli women who are not great. I just think they're not crossing that international pond.
Okay, not yet.
Not yet.
All right, so your show, The Quad, started 8 days after the October 7th incident. I'll just try to be neutral here. And it looks like you're running about a show a week, more or less. So you've had about 35 episodes, and you've had some big names. You had Michael Oren on, you had David Miller, I believe, on.
Yeah.
And you had an Al-Qadian lady who was.
Oh, yes.
So
that
let's
was
talk
one
about
of my favorite episodes. Yes, the Al-Qaeda bride.
the Al-Qaeda bride. So
Yeah.
talk to me about that, because we're focusing on women right now. I think that
So she came on and she shared her story, and she talked about how her father grew up in Gaza and how he did not hate the Jewish people, and how he got along with Jewish people. She wasn't raised to hate the Jewish people. And then her story goes on that her mother ends up marrying a new man who was an extremist and who was part of Al-Qaeda. He was a terrorist. And so her whole life changed, and they were like extreme Muslims. And then she married someone that way, and she had to escape. But that is a great episode to watch. She's phenomenal. And she's someone who grew up in the inside. So she's not out here living in this fa la 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 land, like I would say, our queers for Palestine people or our strippers for Palestine people. She understands what is actually happening within the community.
Yeah. All right. So you said she escaped. What did she escape? Her husband?
She escaped her husband. Yeah. Because he was involved and he was a terrorist, and she had to escape, I believe, with her daughter is her story. And she had to get away and escape.
That's nice.
And she moved I believe she escaped to Canada, but she tells her full story on the show.
Now, do you have are there any other of the episodes where you brought someone Arabic or someone Palestinian and you all just went toe to toe? It was not a harmonious discussion, but really hey, you're wrong. No, you're wrong. No, you're wrong.
No, actually, the Arab women that we've also had on a woman from Lebanon, and we've had on a woman from Egypt, and they are basically there, and they were telling their story about, especially the woman from Egypt, how she's banned from her country now because of, she was a journalist, and she said the way that they were talking about October 7th and denying what happened on October 7th, she spoke out and she said, no, this is real, you guys. And she said in Arab media in her region of the world, it was like a complete denial. And so because she began to write about it, she had to flee her country. So she's here in the United States somewhere. She was actually at the AJC conference we were at. Her name's Daria. And then we also had, like I said before, Lebanese women. So we do have a lot of Arab people who come on the show. I wouldn't say they're all pro-Israel, but they're 100% against Hamas. And so when they do come on, our conversations are more harmonious. And, we just talk about, they give us more of an insight of the culture, being an Arab Muslim and growing up in the region of Egypt and Lebanon and Syria, and what they're taught as they're growing up. So we haven't had any Arabs on that we've had like pushback with yet.
Yet. Okay. I'd like to say that.
Yeah.
Now, all right. So you're doing the show now, 9 months, somewhere around there. You've brought on a lot of people, a lot of discussions. Have you learned anything eye-opening? And if so, give me a couple of examples.
First I want to say I'm extremely privileged to sit with those 3 women that I sit with every week. right now I'm here in Miami for the summer working on my new show, the Black and Jewish podcast. But so I haven't been on the show for the last month, but I'm extremely privileged and blessed to sit with those three women because they're powerhouses for Israel and they're extremely knowledgeable. So I want to say that I learned so much just behind the scenes of listening to their conversations, drawing on the knowledge that they have, one, and two, our guests, especially our Arab guests, they really give me more of an insight about the Arab culture. So although I live in Israel, we do, like Palestinians and Israelis, we live, right on top of each other. Especially in Jerusalem, we're really close. Or if you live in the north, you're next to Arab villages and things. So we do have somewhat of an insight into the culture, but not such a deep insight into Islam and what they actually learn and what they're learning growing up as it pertains to the Jewish people in Israel. So I'm always fascinated by their stories. The woman we had on for Lebanon, and I'm sorry that I'm blanking on these names right now. She's from Syria originally, and then she moved to Lebanon, and then she moved, I believe, to Germany, and that's when she met her first Jew. And when she met her first Jew, she had a panic attack. She was in complete shock because what she learned all her life was that Jews want to kill her. Yeah. And she couldn't move, and then she just had to leave the store. So I cannot imagine that someone would meet a Jew and have a panic attack, So it just gave me it just gave me some real insight of how much indoctrination happens to children in the Arab world concerning Jews.
Yes, and I think that at some level, that the extent of indoctrination, maybe even on both sides, I think it's probably more extreme in that community than in like the American Jewish community or Israelis. But it is probably, they probably could say the same thing about us. But I think that is something that is really getting in the way of making progress. And so my next question to you, and that's just my own feeling. My next question to you is...
Yes, as Jewish people, we do have biases, like any group of people. We will hold biases against others, but there are not, whole entire books and children books that I know of that Jewish people and Jewish children are learning that talks about, Arabs in a way of they are bad and we should murder them and we'll kill them and, God will free us from them in that way. So that's what I mean by indoctrination.
Yeah, and I got to say, I mean, clearly that is something that is a roadblock that until that gets corrected, I don't know how you really get past. I mean, so you have 100 students, little kids that are reading these books, maybe, a handful are not going to be fully embracing that kind of, mindset, and how you get that. How you get people past that is something shocking. Now, in Florida, we've had our own book issue, what books the students can, I mean, it's not nearly that as bad as what's going on in Gaza, but I wonder just where we're going with the politics dictating what people can, what students can read and, when they're growing up and all that stuff. But my question...
I think it's completely different, especially given that Hamas is their government in Gaza. That was democratically elected. And so when you have a terrorist organization as your governmental leadership, like, what do you expect to happen? A good friend of mine, Rudy Rockman, who was in Gaza, he said when he came back, the saddest thing that he saw was that when he would go into these different homes and they would uncover all the children's books, that none of these children, it was like, how did he put it? That none of the children had a childlike life.
Yeah.
He didn't see a childlike life that you would see when you walk into a children's room.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really depressing, I guess, to hear just how bad it is. So have you or other members of the Quad actually been in Gaza?
So we did go to, we went to one of the kibbutz Be'eri, the one that got attacked and where there was found a beheaded baby. However, Emily Schrader, who's a journalist, she did go into Gaza.
Yeah.
She went into Gaza, not with the Quad, but with the other organization she works for.
And did she share with you her impressions?
Yeah, she filmed. She said she was there and she's seeing, the IDF giving aid to the people and trying to move them out of, the war zone areas. And of course, she, felt afraid and startled and different things like that. I'm not sure if she went to the tunnels or not, but we also have an episode on that where it's called Emily in Gaza. And so she went very early on. She went in, I believe, November. So she
Wow.
was there very early on, if not November, December, but she was there very early on in the war.
No, that's thrilling,
Yeah.
I guess you could say.
And
So
we have an episode where we all went to Kibbutz Be'eri, I believe 2 weeks after the attack, and it is horrible. The blood was still on the ground. The smell of dead bodies was still in the air. Some of the weapons, some of the knives were still on the ground, and we went into the homes. I personally seen, all the blood on the ground. I had blood on my shoe when I came back home. I went into a child's room that was, shot up, all the windows busted out with bullet holes. There was blood on the little girl's mattress, just blood splattered everywhere. It was completely horrific. And what was even more horrific about it is that you've seen that a family lived there because all of their clothes are still hanging up. Where they had, breakfast that morning, their table is still set. Everything was still in there. They still had their pictures up. Of course, we couldn't take pictures of the families that live there out of privacy. Yeah. But like on that specific episode, I couldn't even speak. Like people say, oh, you shouldn't cry on camera, especially women. But I just cried on camera because it felt like I was in a horror movie, but this was my reality that I was standing in. So it was so unbelievable.
Yeah, overwhelming, I guess. So,
yes.
All right, so you start the show, and it's 9 months later. You, I would imagine, have an outlook on the future of this conflict. Do you think in the 9 months that you've been doing your show and getting fully immersed in all these topics, that your outlook is improving, is not staying basically the same, or is it worse than what you thought originally?
I wouldn't say my outlook is improving. I would say before October 7th, I did think that we would reach a place of peace. After October 7th, asking me right now, I don't think that is at the forefront of the conversation. Right now, we are just focusing on surviving. How are we going to survive? And we all know that in the back of our heads that the day after is coming, and that we do need a solution for both the people of Gaza and the people of Israel. I do not know what that solution will look like. There's many different options of what might happen, but if I'm being completely honest, I don't feel that we are closer to peace. I just feel that we are going to have a lot more darker times before the light comes. But I do believe that the light will come. I do believe we will achieve that peace. It's just right now in this moment, 9 months after, I don't see that coming, within a year or so.
Yeah. Well, the conflict's been going on for so long. I think 1 year would sort of be unrealistic. But, nothing is perfect as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And I've seen all the criticism of Netanyahu and the government and, listen to people on the other side, trying to read what they write and try and listen to Al Jazeera's programs or whatever, and just really try to, get myself educated as much as possible. Because I know there's two sides to every story, even though they're indoctrinating their kids from day one that we're monsters or whatever. It's kind of hard to.
And I want to be clear that, criticizing the Israeli government, in my opinion, is not anti-Semitic. You don't have to like Bibi Netanyahu. You don't have to like Gantz, and you can criticize the left or the right. And I also want people to know, like before October 7th, for like almost the whole year, we were having massive protests in Israel. And I live next to the president of Israel. And so every Motzei Shabbat, that means after Shabbat was over, massive protests were taking place outside of my apartment. And so it's not that Israeli people don't criticize the government as well. They have criticisms right now of Bibi's performance and just the overall political, over the political spectrum on the right and the left. Everyone has criticisms. And so I just want to state that that is not anti-Semitic, even coming from, someone who's not pro-Israel. You're allowed to have an analysis and say, I disagree with the government. It's just when you start to attack personally the Jewish people and say that we do not have a right to live in our land and that we are not indigenous to the land, this is when we start to get into anti-Semitic talking points.
So I have, Jewish friends that I'm not on the same political side. And so they will say to me, do you support Israel? And I think that is really an unfair question, because as you're sort of illuminating here, even in Israel, there's a lot of protests against the government. So, I mean, it almost seemed like there was more people protesting against the government before October 7th than
the do you support Israel question is coming from, do you support Israel's right to exist? That is what it means to say, that is what it means to say, I stand with Israel. Do I support everything that the government of Israel does? No, but I 100% support the existence of the state of Israel. Now, we know that there are fringe groups within the Jewish community, extremely, extremely, extremely fringe, that people like to highlight. And, they're anti-Zionist. They don't believe there should be a state of Israel. But I believe when people are asking that question, do you support Israel? They're saying, do you support Israel's right to exist? Do you support that there should be a state of Israel for the Jewish people?
Okay, so this is where I disagree with you. The people that I sent are saying this to me are not saying, do I support the right of Israel to exist, defend themselves? They're saying to me, do I support Netanyahu and everything that he does? That's what they're saying. They don't.
Well, I think that's a dumb question.
Yeah, but I think that's really what they're asking me. All right, they're, if I'm critical and I say, hey, I'm a two-state solution person, they're like, well, you don't support Israel, or, because Netanyahu doesn't really want a two-state solution. So,
Right.
I just kind of say, well, so let's go back. Let's go back before October 7th. You were living in Israel. You were living in Tel Aviv, right
I
next.
live in Jerusalem.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
So you're right next to Herzog's house? Apartment?
Yes. The president's residency. Yes.
All right. And just to remind the audience, back then they were protesting about the fact that they were trying to pass legislation to weaken the courts.
Yes. Yeah. The judicial reform. And so that's what they were protesting about.
All right. And
months on end.
And they want to make sure that the Orthodox Jews don't have to go into the military.
Well, I don't know if that was a part of that original protest with the judicial reform, but now, most recently, that has been part of the protest as well.
Yeah.
So most of the country wants the Haredi community to have mandated service. And then obviously the Haredi community will protest because they don't believe that they should have to have mandated service.
So how much of your life have you been living in Israel, more or less?
So I've been in Israel this time for 2 years. I lived in Israel in 2016 for a summer in Haifa. And then in 2019, I lived there for a year.
Gotcha. All right. So when you say that most Israelis want, the ultra-Orthodox Haredi to go into the military, what are you just like, is that your feel? Have there been studies, or is it just like an overwhelming, I mean, to me,
like a statistic? No, that is, I don't have the data on that, but that is my feeling. If you ask any Israeli, they're saying, and I want to say not just Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, because Haredi is considered ultra-Orthodox, because we have Orthodox Jews who serve in the IDF. They serve in the IDF and they're fully religious, fully Orthodox. So, but the stance is, if we have to send our, daughters and sons to go die, why can't you send your people to go, your children also to serve? Everyone has to serve. So why do they, they get an out of not serving? And their argument is that they're supposed to learn Torah full time, and just to know that across Jewish history, Jewish tradition, we've always had scholars that the Jewish people supported, and all they did was learn, right? They didn't work, etc. But that was never a large population of people. That was very select people who are going to be, big stages of our time.
Yeah, rabbinical type.
Or rabbinical, yes.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, and I've read a lot of lengthy pieces on this topic. To me, it just irks me to no end that this is even up for discussion. And a lot of the pieces that I would read would basically overtly suggest that a lot of the, people that are claiming to be ultra-Orthodox and studying, they're not even really studying. It's a bunch of baloney. And I got to tell you, just as a pessimistic attorney or whatever,
I do believe that they're studying, though. I do believe that they are studying.
All right. And so is there a significant portion of the Haredim that say, yes, we should go into the military?
So I do know, I had a friend who he's from the community, and they have a branch in the IDF that kind of recruits people from that community to come and serve in the IDF. So there is a small portion that, goes back into their community and explains to them why it's important for them to serve.
Yeah. And yeah, I think there's like the numbers that I've seen is there's about 1,000 of them. And there's actually one branch, I think, that's exclusively ultra-Orthodox. And apparently they've been a little too aggressive with some of their conduct, from just that I've read.
I should state too, to not only just beat up so much on the ultra-Orthodox, since the beginning of the war, and I'm so sorry I don't have the data offhand in my head. We covered this on the show as well. There was an increase of that community serving voluntarily. It's just, it's not enough, but they did, after October 7th happened, a lot of them did come up and step up.
Yeah, well, that's good to know, because
I hate to say a lot instead of giving the actual data figure.
Yeah. All right. So tell me about the Michael Oren show. I mean, you've gotten some big names on, and his topic was more or less bashing the present administration. So, I would like to hear about his show, and also has the Quad done shows about American politics and like. So
we absolutely have done shows about American politics. We've had Michael Oren on, we've had Ambassador David Friedman on. Michael Oren's show, I specifically wasn't on that episode that week. However, we do cover American politics as it relates to Israel. So the protests, what's going on with, on-campus protests. I specifically have covered like the woke religion that's happening here in America, of how the politics here are shaped by the oppressor and the oppressed, and how that now affects Israel, because everyone sees it from that lens, and you cannot take the American narrative and lens and apply it to Israel, because it just doesn't work. But how that has resulted in people seeing Israel as this is, white Jews oppressing brown Palestinians, because here the narrative is always the white man and the black man, given America's narrative, politics, and history. So we've unpacked that as well, about why, given that the Jewish people in America are a minority, why don't they get the same sympathies as other minorities? So yeah, mostly the campuses, a lot about the woke religion. We've covered too about Biden and how this administration has, publicly not been so supportive of Netanyahu in the way that we would like. I specifically said that, I didn't like that Biden was calling out Bibi publicly about Rafah. I feel like some of those conversations should have been private, and that it just emboldened Hamas to not make, hostage deals, because they see that our ally is not that strong with us, and we're not presenting as two strong allies. We've also criticized, there's differing opinions. Should America be supporting Israel with foreign aid, and having Americans feeling like, why is my tax dollars going over to Israel? Why is Israel so important? What's so important about this allyship? Different things like that. So we have covered that. We haven't, I think they did a recent episode this summer, which I said I haven't been on the show for the past month, where they covered elections that are going on in London, Canada, and America, and I believe France as well. So they just did like an episode on elections in general.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll have to wait and see how this all plays out. I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy, I remember when he was debating said, oh, Israel doesn't need our money, but since then, everything that I've seen indicates that they do. And they,
Yeah.
I don't think it's, with what's.
At the end of the day, it does make Israel dependent. And sometimes American interests are not the same as Israel interests. But that's true of any country, right?
Mm-hmm.
But could Israel survive independent on its own without a superpower? I don't believe so. So if America wasn't our superpower, who would our superpower be?
Yeah.
China, Russia. So is it better that the United States is that superpower that is our ally? I think so.
Yeah. So the sense that you got when you were in Israel, and we're giving all this money and weapons, and yet, I guess a lot of Israelis are not happy because we're airing our disagreements publicly and all that. Is there a strong anti-American or strong anti-Biden position, or is it sort of all over the place in Israel?
It's actually all over the place. Obviously, if you speak to right-wing Israelis, they really like Trump. They're very anti-Biden. If you speak to left-wing Israelis, I've had a woman tell me that Biden has been the best president for Israel in all of history, that no one has done more for Israel than the Biden administration. So I would say that is like not a conclusive of like Israelis I can't generalize and say most Israelis think this. But I would say most Israelis still want to have the US-Israel allyship.
All right. So if Netanyahu doesn't call for early elections or the Knesset, when is the next election for the prime minister in Israel? I think we're a year away.
Yeah. So if elections aren't called, which we can call elections at any time, because how it works is that you have to. Their system's completely different from America, and I've had to really learn it. And I was thinking one day, I said, why do Israelis protest so much? And then I realized it's because they're not a republic like us. We can go and we vote for a representative to represent us, and then if we're not happy, we go to that representative that represents our state or our specific district, and we complain and we say, well, we'll vote you out next year. And because Israel's not a republic in that way, the only way for their voices to be heard is to protest, because they don't have a direct representative, because everything is built by coalition building. And can the person that they want to be the prime minister, can they now build a government? Can you get 61 people and can you build a government? And then if you can't build a government, then the next coalition tries to build a government. And so you don't have that direct representation. So that was just like a little insight that I was learning of, like, why are all these protests always happening? Because that's the only way they can get their voices heard.
Yeah.
So yeah, in terms of elections, I would say even on our show, we're pretty split on this. Everybody in Israel wants an election. I would say that. I believe that everyone in Israel is unhappy with the current government. Yeah. However, when to hold elections, I think it's a split 50-50. Like even on our show, Vivian thinks we should go ahead and have elections. Fleur and Emily and I, we kind of think is it the right time? What point, like what would holding elections right now, what would that do? What kind of outcome would we have? That we should focus all of our energy on first getting our hostages back and destroying Hamas. And so it's been really a struggle of, people are upset by Bibi's performance. So they're like, if I just have someone new. Yeah. But it's kind of hard because it's like, do you just change someone new right now in the middle of a war? Or do we just see this out and then we have elections? So there's no doubt that people want to have elections. It's just like, when should we have elections? Is it the right time to have elections? Does it matter that we don't have, all of our hostages back?
All right. So, I look at the parliamentary system and the coalition, And I always am dumbfounded. I mean, because Israel had like a number of elections in like a 5-year period of time. I'm like, God, how do they have how do the people there have the patience for that or whatever? But nonetheless, they did. And then it was always a struggle to put together a coalition. And to me, I'm like, wow, to me, it's so obvious. Why doesn't the center and Likud join together? Because for the most part, they seem to be sort of in line. Instead, we have, Netanyahu having a kowtow to ultra-Orthodox people that, have been, in jail and in prison
And
before.
from what I hear from Israelis, even the people who are right wing, like my right wing friends will tell me, I am right wing, and Bibi is not. He's not truly right wing. He's a center. He's in the center right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that Bibi really wants to go out with a good legacy. And given that October 7th happened, and given, all the mistakes that happened, around his response times and different things that people are upset with, I think he's just trying to make sure, like everyone says, they know that he believes he's finished, he's done, but he wants to continue to have position and power so that he can go out with a good legacy and a good name. Because right now it's like people just want him out.
People have been saying he's been done for over a decade. So I
Yeah.
don't, and he's a young guy, looks healthy, he speaks well. So I don't know, he's going,
King Bibi.
here's my thing. Okay, so we've got Donald Trump, he's got all these criminal cases going against him, and his people are like, oh, it's bogus. And then the other people are like, what's taking so long? And I'm an attorney, and I'm like, oh my God, these cases really aren't even that old. They're not even like a year, they're like the indictments aren't even a year old. Bibi's been on, he was indicted like, I don't even know, 10 years ago, like his cases I thought were going to come up for. What do you know what's going on with his cases? Like what, to me, I would like them to just wrap it up. And then because, the theory is that Bibi's doing all this to stay in power, because he's afraid that he's going to lose these cases and get thrown out. And why can't they work a deal out and be done with it?
Listen, I have no idea what's going on with those cases, like where the investigation process is. Like, I am unsure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to have to bring on another guest for that. All right.
Yes.
So, I've got a million other topics.
I don't know.
All right. That's a good enough answer. I'll accept that. We won't edit that part. Okay. All right. So I want to move on to my last topic with you. You're African American. I'm not. I have no idea what it's like to live a life as an African American. Must present you some serious challenges. You're a Jew. All right. I share that with you, but being an African American Jew, God only knows what kind of challenges that's presented, even in Israel, even though I know that there are Black Jews in Israel.
Right.
And now you're starting a new podcast called Black and Jewish Podcast. So talk to me about the podcast. Talk to me about like why you're doing it. Does that really dovetail into the challenges, if any? Maybe you haven't had any challenges as an African-American female Jew.
Right. So first, I like to say that I think I have challenges like any other human being has challenges of, struggling to find your voice and your purpose and where you want to go in life and who you're going to marry and when are you going to have children and things like for women, especially like, when am I going to get married and have children? When do I put my career on hold? Because I actually really want to pursue a family and all the career opportunities and trying to balance out, family and career. I believe that's something that all women struggle with. Specifically in Israel, as a Black Jew, I always say that it is much easier to be Black and Jewish in Israel than it is America. And in Israel, I personally have not experienced any racism. And that doesn't mean that racism does not exist in Israel. It just hasn't been my personal experience. But in America, it's more difficult in the sense of the American Jewish community because, one, they never assume that you're Jewish because here in America, they're only used to seeing Ashkenazi Jews. Yeah. So they're just like confused, and there's a lot of questions around your identity. When you walk into any synagogue, I can walk into any synagogue in Israel, and I'm treated just like a Jew. There's no questions.
No one's like, what? Oh my God, who's
There's
that?
no double looks. Like, I'm not exotic in Israel at all. Okay.
Okay.
I can just exist and be. In America, it's more like, what's your story? Who are you? Like, are you trying to infiltrate the synagogue? Like, well, who is this? I remember I went to Shabbat 3 weeks ago here in Miami, and I seen a Jewish guy, and I could tell he was Israeli. So I said, like, Slicha, Eichel Bet Knesset. And I told him, like, excuse me, where's this synagogue? And he's like, are you Jewish? And I'm like, yes, can you just tell me? And then he starts questioning me. And this is like, I didn't ask for all of that. Can you just tell me where the synagogue is? You know, I'm lost. It's on Shabbat. And I'm like, you know, walking, trying to find a synagogue. So things like that. But anything, that's just, I would say, like, just cultural differences. I was just at an event in New York, and it was for influencers to combat anti-Semitism. And they had a diversity panel. They had like maybe 12 panels. So on the diversity panel, they had a Chinese Jew and an African-American Jew, and then a Black Jew from France. And my friend, Amy Albertson, who was the Chinese Jew, she said something very powerful, which I agree with. She said, listen, we're happy to speak about our experiences as, you know, being, I guess, Jews of color, but that's not our term. Our term is that we are just Jewish, and we want to speak on every different type of panel, you know, that is about our expertise. We don't want to just speak on the diversity panel. We don't want to come up and say, hey, we're a colored Jew, so now we're going to speak on the diversity panel. It's like, for her, she's an influencer and she's a social media marketer. So I put her on the panel talking about marketing and how you can be a better marketer. You know, for me, I'm a political commentator, so put me on the political panel. Why are we creating a diversity panel? And so it's really hard that the Jewish people have fell into what we do in America, which is we really do judge you by your race or your ethnicity in your group, and we group you that way. But that is not the Torah way. That is not the Jewish tradition. There was never a time where we called ourselves in Torah the Black Jew, the white Jew, the ex-Jew. Like, we just don't, that's not our language. And so now we are using other people's language to describe ourselves, when we should all just simply be either Jewish, which means, you know, from the tribe of Judah and Judea, or B'nai Israel, that we are children of Israel. And so I call my podcast the Black and Jewish podcast, because I'm both Black American and I'm both Jewish, but really I'm just a Jew, you know? And that podcast is really created to build communities between the Black American community and the Jewish community, because I come from both communities. But it's not the way in which I define myself or see myself, but is the way that I have to explain myself being in America. In Israel, I'm simply a Jew, but in America, I am the Black Jew. And so here, to make other people understand, I use their language, but I do think that it's unfortunate that we have to use the language and terminology here rather than using what we as Jewish people use to describe ourselves.
All right, I'm not going to talk to you about the what's going on in the campuses, because my producer's going to kill me. The show's gone. He wants 20-minute shows or whatever, and I'm like, I can't do that in 20 minutes. So tell me who I should bring on to discuss what's going on with the campuses.
With college campuses, I would say that Semite is really good. Yirmiyahu, and I can send you his contact.
Absolutely.
And then Rudy Rockman, if you can get Rudy on, he's on campuses on the ground debating, literally face to face. He's one of the most top, greatest debaters I've ever seen, just because he keeps a calm demeanor while people are yelling in his face that, you know, you're Jewish and you're a baby killer. He's just like, okay, let me tell you what happened in Gaza. Like, he's just so calm, like he doesn't care what they're saying. So I think those two people should definitely be on the show.
Not me. I like to fly off the handle. It's okay. You know, I like flying off the handle, bouncing off the wall, whatever. All right. So when are you going to launch your show, and how do our fans follow? Find you?
So follow me on Instagram at Real Ashira Solomon. You can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Ashira _Solomon. And the show will be exclusively on Rumble. So make a Rumble account and follow the Black and Jewish podcast with Ashira Solomon.
And how do we find the quad?
The quad you can find on YouTube or anywhere you listen to your podcast.
Excellent. All right, Ashira Solomon. I'm not going to say African-American Jew. I'm going to say a political commentator who is Jewish, who's a Jew.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on. I love it. And we'll have to carry on this discussion. Maybe you'll find a place for me on your show. I don't know where I'd fit.
That would be great, especially since you're here in Miami. What do you mean you don't know where you're fit? I'm having conversations with everyone about anything and everything.
Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that in the show notes also.
Yes.
All right, okay. All right. That'll do it for this episode of Cut to the Chase. Ms. Solomon, thank you for coming on and sharing your show, your shows, and all this information and insight. It's been a privilege and a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, folks, subscribe, rate, and review. If you have comments, you want me to bring her back on, I would love to bring her back on, talking about other things, because these topics are not going away anytime soon. All right?
No, they're not. Alrighty. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.